I don't think the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise is going to be ending for a very long time. Which honestly is incredibly exciting because I don't think I'm alone when I say that Five Nights at Freddy's is a huge part of not just my childhood, but my entire life. Spanning gaming, film, literature, all the horror genres. It's a shining beacon, a work of art, it is. That being said, Five Nights at Freddy's most recent release into the franchise, Secret of the Mimic, has got me honestly wondering, what's next for Five Nights at Freddy's? First things first, obviously there is the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie coming out on the 5th of December, which of course is very exciting. Next is a very interesting one, and I have to read this, I have it written down because it's an interesting title here. The book is titled Five Nights at Freddy's Secret Artifacts, Confidential Evidence from the Archives of Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated. Basically, it's going to be a collection of evidence from the Fazbear universe. Old tickets, Polaroids, pictures, newspaper clippings, which I just learned about this, and I'm gonna get more into that later. But I literally just looked up if there was any new books coming out from Scott, and apparently that's one of them. Sorry, my dog is making a nest out of my dirty laundry over there. Next up is most likely going to be another 16-bit pixelated game from Megacat Studios based on the Fazbear Fright stories. This would be included more in the theory section of this video if Scott himself hadn't said on his interview with Dawko that he plans on making a fetch game. Which is honestly really cool because I absolutely loved the Into the Pit game from Megacat. Those of you who don't know, Fetch is another one of the first original Fazbear Fright stories that came out around the same time as Into the Pit did. And obviously, the Ruin DLC for Security Breach left off with a very, very obvious cliffhanger and expectation for a sequel. Arguably, you could say that Help Wanted 2 is a sequel, but that was that was a sequel to Help Wanted, obviously. But still, it felt like it was connected to Ruin in a weird way, so yada. Or I guess Ruin is a DLC, so it would be a sequel of Security Breach. Although I feel like Security Breach and Ruin are honestly two separate entities based on how vastly different they are. I'm honestly extremely excited for all of these things as a massive, huge, gargantuan even FNAF fanboy. I absolutely loved the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and I don't care what anyone says about how good or not good the movie was. I think that the fan service well made up for any lack of scariness or any lack of whatever people felt like was missing in the FNAF movie. Trust me, I get it, and I definitely felt that the first time I saw it, but the more times I watched it, the more times I appreciated the work that was put into it. And I hope to God that the sequel does well because Matthew Lillard basically confirmed that if the FNAF 2 movie does well, they're going to make a FNAF 3 movie. Which, just from the trailers and the list of cast and voice actors, you've got Matthew Lillard, the other guy, Skeet Ulrich, that played in Scream with Matthew Lillard back in the day. We've got Matt Pat voicing Toy Bonnie, what's her name, Megan Fox voicing Toy Chica, which I actually haven't even seen too many of her movies, but I know she's an incredibly popular. Kellen Goff apparently as Toy Freddy, I think. It just seems like it's going to be a really good deal, this movie, and I'm very excited for it. As for the new book goes, just judging by the title and the description of what it is, it feels like it has the potential to be a massive lore dump. Very similar to, honestly, the security logbook of the modern era, if you will, is what it feels like it's going to be. But of course, that's speculation, but I don't know what else it would be, really. Which, given how many questions Secret of the Mimic brought into the picture, something like that to stabilize the lore a little bit would honestly be very helpful, I feel like. I mean, Secret of the Mimic brought the whole concrete foundation of the franchise into question. For a moment, Secret of the Mimic even had me questioning whether it was some sort of soft reboot of the franchise, a lot like an old Matt Pat theory from back in the day when he mentioned that maybe the original Help Wanted was like a soft reboot of the franchise. Obviously that wasn't exactly true, I don't think, and I obviously don't think that Secret of the Mimic is a soft reboot of the franchise because it didn't really change anything of the current lore. It just kind of threw in more details that we didn't know were there, which is something that when you're going back to the very, very beginning, that we didn't even know existed before, you can kind of they can really just do what they want with it. And, you know, I guess it can be discussed whether it actually changes things or just alters them into what they already were the entire time, but we didn't know about. It's an interesting topic of discussion. Weirdly, I almost want to say that I'm most excited for the next 16-bit Mega Cat Studios game, because honestly, Into the Pit was just so fun. It really was just, I have 27 hours in the game, which actually isn't that much, but considering you can pretty easily beat the game in one sitting with how short it is, which is essentially what you have to do, I think, for Nightmare Mode, or maybe you get a save file every night in the game, but you resets the whole thing if you die. I actually almost beat Nightmare Mode with the best ending. I have almost all the achievements in the game. I almost beat Nightmare Mode just on my laptop. I almost beat Nightmare Mode with the best ending, but I forgot one little detail on night 5 that I thought I did, so I didn't get the achievement. And to this day, I want to go back and try and get that because that would be awesome. Okay, so this part of the video is honestly the one that I'm most excited for. These are going to be my theories on what's to come, even beyond what we know for the future of FNAF. For those of you guys who don't remember, at the end of Ruin, Gregory dropped Cassie in an elevator down to the bottom of wherever, which we're gonna get into that because I don't know if many people have discussed that, but an elevator drops to somewhere even further down after she escapes from the Mimic and the Mimic's arm gets cut off, and that's when the game cuts. Roll credits when Cassie falls to the bottom. So a little while back on Twitter, a music producer that worked for maybe Steelwool or just worked on some music titles for previous FNAF games on Twitter posted a piece of music that he'd been working on, and the quote, sorry, I wrote it down here. The label of the post was first teaser from the project Forgotten Names and Faces, which total transparency, I learned this information from a Daco video, so Daco, of course, more valuable than I. However, because he actually did real research. However, I did learn this. Forgotten Names and Faces it's not an anagram, whatever that word thing is called when it's the first letter of each word of something. FNAF, Forgotten Names and Faces. It spells out Five Nights at Freddy's, FNAF. So, obviously, and it says teaser from something. And the hashtags on this post are individual words that say, "Who will catch you when you fall into the abyss?" Which apparently is a direct quote from a poem, by the way. Poem from a guy by the name of Tom Woodliff. The entire poem isn't all to do with this, however, that part of the poem seems to have some significance to this music producer. The song itself has a dark tone to it, sort of like a depressing, lonely sort of vibe. But edited into it is the Princess Quest theme song. Honestly, the song that I might end up having playing over this video, because pretty common. But it's the Princess Quest theme song, which if you guys don't know, Princess Quest is a big part of the lore of the recent era of FNAF games. So it's mixed into this track, it fades in and out of this lonely, dark song, which is the song doesn't have any words, it's just a melody, like a game soundtrack would be. So yeah, like I said, I got this from a Daco video, but feel free to do your own research, guys. However, I agree with what he said in his video, which is most likely this new FNAF game is probably going to be called Five Nights at Freddy's The Abyss. I think that would be an immensely, deeply cool name to give a Five Nights at Freddy's game. Maybe they won't, maybe they feel like that's too predictable, I don't know, but I feel like that would be pretty damn cool. So for now, let's call this game Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Abyss. To understand what the next game coming up is, I think we need to ask two questions. First of all, where does the elevator go? And second of all, what about the blob? Obviously the elevator drops into the abyss, but what is the abyss? Bear in mind that we're already at the very bottom of the Pizzaplex, at or even below the depth of Five Nights at Freddy's 6. So how does the elevator drop down? Where is it dropping down to? Now, the only place that I can think of elsewhere in the entire franchise that is intentionally made with the purpose of being below ground is Sister Location. In the alternate ending of Ruin, there is a scooping room that has a very Sister Location vibe to it that scoops the Mimic. Now, I know that ending is not canon, or most likely is not canon, but just because that ending is not canon doesn't mean that room does not exist. Just like, and I'm gonna get to talking about the blob more, but just like even though the burn trap ending where we go down and see the blob in Security Breach isn't canon, doesn't mean that down there isn't real and that the blob isn't down there. And we know that the blob is real because, so I went back and watched some playthroughs of Ruin and Help Wanted 2. Besides the large, throbbing nostalgia, what I got from watching these playthroughs, especially of Ruin, is that the blob appears in Ruin towards the very beginning. It shows its face through the wall, which means it's not only real, but the Mimic was probably telling the truth when it said that something tunneled out. Also, if I'm not mistaken, the glowing mushrooms and waterfall situation that was happening in Ruin, and once again, this is not my information, I learned this from a MapHat video back when Ruin came out. I guess that sort of vibe was in the Twisted Ones novel back when that happened, and it was somehow connected to Central Location, so I won't go too far into that, but I'll leave it there. Also, it could obviously just be a brand new location that we haven't seen before that Gregory drops her down to, but that just doesn't feel right. Maybe that's what's happening, but I don't know, I don't think so. Or it's very possible that for some reason Gregory just for some reason sent Cassie down to the deepest, darkest depths of hell to spend time with William in Ultimate Custom Night. I'm not really sure. Next question I think is even more interesting, which is, what about the blob? Like I already said, the one thing I learned from going back to Ruin was that the blob still exists and is a component in things that is still a loose thread right now. Like maybe maybe Scott regrets bringing it into the picture after a Security Breach, like probably a lot of things that happened in Security Breach. However, he made it a point to make Burn Trap not canon, but he didn't go out of his way to make the blob not canon. He brought it back in Ruin. And the hole that the blob is in, they brought back in Help Wanted 2. If you don't know about the blob, it's basically down in the depths of FNAF 6. It's all the pieces of the old animatronics from the past era of FNAF. All them kind of just mangled together even after like the souls were released. Maybe they weren't completely released, or I'm not entirely sure on that aspect of it. However, the blob is essentially just I think the spirits are gone and it's just a mass of pure agony, which is the other driving force in FNAF to bring inanimate things to life, is the power of agony alongside Remnant, which is the soul metal. I mean, the blob even ties back to the original teasers for Security Breach. It was there. So it seems to be a fairly important character that is just hanging in the whatever right now. Of course, none of this is taking into account Secret of the Mimic, but I don't think it really needs to, because regardless of, the only thing Secret of the Mimic really changes is the early timeline and the mid timeline, because regardless of what happens back then, the Mimic still ends up in Ruin. So anything after Ruin is gonna end up the same way, regardless of what happened previously in the storyline, because I'm sure they made Ruin with the intention of the Mimic storyline happening, so we don't really have to worry about that, because I'm theorizing about what's happening going forward, not about what happened back. In conclusion, I think that the Mimic and the blob existing at the same time in the universe creates some really exciting possibilities for expansion of the universe and more games, which I am all here for. You know, maybe the blob is actually friendly. Maybe the blob will save Cassie from the Mimic at the end of the next FNAF game. The possibilities are really endless. We just don't know what's gonna happen and the roles that these characters are gonna play. Now, no matter what this game ends up being, sadly, I most likely won't be able to play it because I'm not gonna have, you know, whatever platform it's on. I don't have a VR system. I have a last gen Xbox One X. I don't even know if that can run, you know, Steel Wool makes things primarily for PlayStation anyways. I very well might not be able to play it, but I always watch the new FNAF games when they come out. I'm very excited to see what they do, regardless of what it is, because Steel Wool, of course, they had a hiccup with Security Breach, but they made a lot of improvements for Ruin. And then they took what worked with Ruin and dialed it up to 11, and plus 15 is what they did, and made the Mimic Usain Bolt, which made the Mimic, Secret of the Mimic, a really scary game, and I think it's probably one of the best things they've done yet, besides Help Wanted 2. So I have no doubt that the next game is going to be probably their magnum opus, honestly. It's probably going to be incredibly good. I think I even remember Scott mentioning back when Secret of the Mimic was announced, that wasn't even the big project that Steelwool was working on. Although maybe he was talking about help on it too, because I don't really remember when that was, but I can't wait for Nike Cat Studios to make more 16-bit pixelated games. Honestly, I hope they do that for every Fazbear Fright story and Tales from the Pizzaplex story. Just spam those things out. Tons of mini adventures. Love that. Don't even care if they have no lore significance. It's just a fun experience. This is actually me from a few days later. I forgot to include at the end of the video, I'd love to see an official like Fredbear's Family Diner game. There's plenty of fan games, but I would love to see it officially. I just don't know how it would work because I don't know if there's anything possessed at Fredbear's Family Diners before it closes, so I don't know how that would be made into a game. The other thing that I think is more likely, which is almost more exciting because it's more likely, I would just love to see a return to form, like maybe a game made by Click Team or just Scott himself, where it's like it takes place in modern FNAF, but it has the gameplay of the original Five Nights at Freddy's experience. Just point and click, really lean into the horror and checking the cameras and the jump scares, but with the modern FNAF storyline, somehow make that happen. I think that would be awesome. It would be really, really good. As far as the FNAF 3 movie goes, way down the line in the future, the second movie hasn't even come out yet. I'm gonna let you guys know what I think about that when that comes out. However, the 3 movie, I think as long as they nail Springtrap, it's gonna be an amazing movie. Don't really need to say much else there. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy the next one even more, and I cannot wait to see you then. Thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing day or night or whatever time you're watching this.